Our guest speakers today are two longtime church members and devoted church leaders, Patty Potter and Ken Mall. They will be speaking about the teachings of Valerie Kaur. Valerie Kaur is the person who initiated the concept of revolutionary love. Valerie is an American artist, documentary filmmaker, lawyer, educator, faith leader, and a member of the Sikh faith and founder of the Revolutionary Love Project. Reverend Tim has presented a sermon about revolutionary love, and Ken and Patty have taught classes on this subject. Ken and Patty got so much from Valerie's revolutionary love teachings, they decided to take her second class. Fortunately for us. Her second class is called Secret Wellspring, Uncover the Wisdom Within. What you will hear today from Patty and Ken are words and teaching from Valerie Kaur's class. Let's warmly, please, welcome Patty and Ken as they offer today's sermon.
Good morning. Buenos dias. My life is good. Every month, magically, in my checking account, there appears a check from the state of California with my retirement system, and it's enough money to live on. Yay. I have quality health insurance, and so that's good. And I have a community of people who care about me. So I'm very privileged. However, there's times in life that are challenging and difficult. When I look at the world's events, it's hard for me to understand how people can be so cruel, and it hurts my heart. Oh dear, I thought I was going to be okay. I have a loved one who is really struggling and just keeps digging themselves deeper and deeper. And, that's a struggle. On the lighter side, my neighbor has two Great Danes, and they bark. They bark a lot. But here's the thing. When facing difficult times in our lives, the more we build the sovereign space inside of ourselves, that inner wisdom, the more we're able to have freedom, and no matter what's happening in the world. To find that freedom, Valerie Kaur, the creator of the class Secret Wellspring, Uncovering the Wisdom Within, suggests to name your inner wisdom within, name your inner wisdom's term of endearment for you, visualize your inner wisdom, and to find your inner voice. Naming your inner wisdom helps cultivate a relationship with that inner wisdom, and this is what Valerie says. My wise woman is called wise woman because I imagine her as an older version of me, someone who is sitting deeply in her serenity and her freedom and her sovereignty, someone who can see me with clear eyes and a heart of love. So wise woman is the right name for me. I call mine wise one. Wise, wisdom, well, duh, of course. And it's like a sage that just is all-knowing. And one, because I want it to be gender neutral and more of a general idea. So mine, inner wisdom, I call wise one. In naming our inner wisdom, some people use words from formal religious traditions, sacred names like God, Jesus, Allah, Buddha, nature. And secular folks may think of the voice as intuition one hears when in a calm state of mind. And there's many names for inner wisdom. As I read these names, pick out maybe one or two that work for you. Spirit of the universe, love, creative intelligence, spirit of nature, universal mind, creator, realm of spirit, great reality, presence of infinite power and love, divine mind, great spirit, and one that's my favorite that I think we can all get behind, somethingness. Yes. We can name our inner wisdom to be able to tune into it. So I invite you to take a moment and think of a name for your inner wisdom. Valerie's inner wisdom calls her, "Oh, my love." And she says, it happens to be the same name I use for my children. It's a term of endearment that sinks into the fullness of affection and enoughness. My wise one calls me kiddo. I'm not quite sure why, but when we went through this exercise, that's the name that came up. It's affectionate and it's lighthearted, so I'm kiddo to my wise one. What your inner wisdom calls you can be other things. It can be something that inspires you, something that you might call a precious child or pet. And some ideas are sweetheart, my darling, my beloved one, sweet one, my child, my best friend. Take a moment and think about what could be your inner wisdom's term of endearment for you. We can also visualize, an image of our inner wisdom to connect to it. Valerie speaks about what hers looks like this way. Her wise woman, she says, "I begin to imagine her sitting regally on a throne of her own mind, on the throne of my heart. I see her draped in colors, shimmering colors, wearing a crown on her head and a staff in her hand. I see her at her feet, a beautiful dog, a beloved dog, a dog I once had for many years, there as her companion. I see her sitting on a throne room that's glistening gold. I see in that throne room cocoa trees, because I love chocolate. My inner wisdom it's kind of like me encased in me. It's the pure me without the mucky muck of the world, and it sits right here. It's not something I can consciously name, it's more of an essence. So your inner wisdom, you can visualize a color, a shape, a form, and maybe where it is. So take a moment to do that, if you will. So we have a name for our inner wisdom. We have a term of endearment that it calls us. We can visualize our inner wisdom. Now the nitty-gritty. How exactly can we find and use that inner voice? And again, here's the way that Valerie describes it. She's with me in the midst of terrible grief. I remember being collapsed on the bed after losing someone I loved and just feeling like, this is unbearable, I cannot bear this. And the wise one said in me, "Oh, my love, this is transition. You're in transition. You are being changed by this, and who you will be on the other side of this will not be who you were. So let yourself feel the tears on your cheek. Let yourself feel the agony. Know that you are brave enough to feel it. Not to shut down, but to feel it. And I will move you through it. I will get you up in a few minutes off this bed, wash your face, go down to the children and be with them. And then I'll be here to let you cry again." For me, when there's a difficult time, I imagine the difficulty and then a scenario of how I might respond to it, and then another one and another scenario. And at one of those points, I just get a softening in my heart and my chest, and there's just an audible sigh that comes out of me, and then I know next steps. Sometimes my wise one calls me out and says, I'm thinking of the situation, and my wise one says, Now, Patty, you know that's not true. Let's try again. And sometimes my wise one is just affirming, and that feels good. It affirms. So sometimes that's the way I hear it. How else can we use our inner voice? You can imagine that you're speaking to a child, a beloved child, and see what kinds of thoughts flow out of your mouth. Or you can imagine it as a friend, someone where you feel really seen and you can be vulnerable and you can vent and cry. You know that no matter what you do, no matter what you say, that you will be loved. You may spend time just thinking. It's okay if you're just thinking. You're just taking the best part of your self-consciousness or stream of consciousness and bringing it forward into your mind so you can hear it better. So if we speak of our inner wisdom as a child, speak to it as a friend, or just think in our mind, the practice of using inner wisdom it's just that, a practice. And when you first do it, it might feel a little strange. You might get little glimmers or images or sounds or a shadow or an impression, and that's okay. There is no wrong way to do this. So, we can name our inner wisdom, its term of endearment for us, visualize the inner wisdom, and find and use our inner voice. The more we build that sovereign space within us, the more we're able to feel freedom no matter what is happening in the world. And that is what this wisdom practice is about, developing that place within us.
Good morning. Buenos dias. Patty's talked about Valerie Carr's description of the wise woman. Patty's own name for it is wise one. I call my wise person wise guy. This may conjure up visions of a smart aleck or a gangster, but I'm really thinking about a guy who's wise. Okay, there might be a touch of irony or irreverence in the naming, but I am who I am. Wise guy refers to me as lek doi, which in the Cantonese dialect of my parents translates to smart or clever boy. There's absolutely no irony in that name. The little critic is another inner voice, and Valerie Carr refers to the power struggle throughout her life between her wise woman and her little critic. Since I was a child, I wrestled with the little critic in me, the voice that told me that I was not strong enough, smart enough, or good enough. Little critic is Carr's term for what others thinkers call the inner critic, and can be thought of as a voice that expresses one's fears and insecurities, that says, I can't. Author and self-described creativity evangelist Denise Jacobs writes, quote, there are those who, by either good fortune or hard work, are not afflicted by self-doubt and don't seem to have much of an inner critic at all. And then there are the rest of us, we who struggle daily to maintain a modicum of self-assurance as we go through our work and personal lives because of the barrage of self-critical inner dialogue that is our constant companion, end quote. I'm guessing that most, if not all of us here and on our virtual campus, and those who may watch later, have experience with a personal little critic. In psychology and psychotherapy, the inner critic can be viewed as a subpersonality, a psychological construct that activates to allow us to deal with psychosocial stressors that cause us discomfort. It can help us distance and insulate ourselves from a threatening or worrisome situation by giving us something else on which to focus. It can be seen as essentially protective in function, but one that achieves this protection from external stressors by criticizing and demeaning us, pointing out our weaknesses, and undermining our self-confidence. In The Secret Wellspring, Valerie Carr describes the journey toward uncovering your inner wisdom. She did not originate the idea of inner voices, inner wisdom, or inner critics, but she's provided a very useful framework on which to explore the relationship between one's wisdom within and one's inner critic. In a series of guided inquiries or meditations, Carr demonstrates, instructs, and encourages listeners to visualize, describe, draw, and map one's wise woman and little critic. Patty has described her wise one. I've visualized my wise guy as a talking flame, blue and white at its most intense, with varying shades of yellow, orange, and red. I borrowed from Chinese and Japanese ideas about qi and qi, and located my wise guy flame in the lower dantan, or lower abdomen, just below my navel. My little critic, who I refer to as LC, has the appearance of Red from the Angry Birds video game and movies. My daughter was older when Angry Birds became popular, so I'm not really familiar with the canon, and this is not to imply that all Angry Birds are little critics. My little critic just happens to resemble Red. LC has a squawky, high-pitched voice and resides in my upper chest near the hollow of my throat. I can feel the pressure of his presence when he's active. He's kind of there now. So once we've described and located our wise person and little critic, how does this help us in our journey toward inner wisdom? How do we train our ear to recognize and listen to the wisdom within ourselves? Here we can recall a central theme of Valerie Carr's book, See No Stranger, A Manifesto of Revolutionary Love, which is, you are a part of me I do not yet know. You are a part of me I do not yet know. She suggests that in addition to those we meet along our way, we can apply this idea to our little critic as well. Attempting to suppress, ignore, or banish the little critic is not an effective long-term solution. That voice will come back and persist, and it can be very loud. Fear and self-doubt will return. Rather, we can work to embrace the little critic inside us, that fearful, spiteful part of us, to bring it into the light and to integrate it into our whole selves. Valerie Carr suggests keeping a wisdom journal to help you develop your relationship with your wise person. This can take the form of a conversation between you and your wise person on what's happened during the day and what's going to happen. There's not a separate little critic journal because the little critic can be so loud that it would be counterproductive. But he can be part of the conversation with you and your wise person. The important thing is that it's a dialogue, a dance between that negative, doubting, pessimistic voice and the response from the wisest, most compassionate part of us. I started to keep a wisdom journal when Patty and I co-facilitated the Secret Wellspring classes last fall, and I've made entries intermittently since. I do more often take time to find a quiet space in which to have an internal dialogue with my wise guy, and usually my little critic is also present. I found it helpful in the beginning to use a worksheet that had 3 columns. 1, little critic statement. 2, what is your little critic afraid of? And 3, wise guy's response. I'll give you a few examples. Some of you may not be surprised that I've been a little anxious about this morning's service. In the interest of time, I'm going to combine a couple of my little critic's concerns into a longer statement. No one will be interested in your talk. You'll be lucky if anyone shows up. And those that do won't appreciate it. It'll be awful. So the fear is that I won't be good enough and that I'll be embarrassed and ashamed. And my wise guy's response is, different people have different needs and interests. It's not all about you. You've had a good track record talking about this material, and you've done your homework. You can do what you can do. In another example, I've been more and more aware of my chronic health issues, various aches and pains in recent years. They seem at times to be increasing exponentially. LC might say, you're going downhill fast, you're not doing enough about it. Even if you did, you couldn't stop the decline. Your health problems will take over. You'll end up weak, sick, and isolated. LC fears physical incapacity, not being in control, being a burden to others. Wise Guy says, some of the changes in your body are an expected part of aging. You usually follow your doctor's orders, and you've made some healthy changes. You have good insurance and access to care, and you have a strong support system among your family and friends. One more example. Last year, my nephew gave me a sweatshirt that I really like and which I wear all the time at home, but never in public. I thought it might be appropriate to wear today, but worried it would be too attention-getting. And my little critic said, "You can't wear that. You'll look ridiculous. No one will take you seriously." Wise guy said, "You have 24 Aloha shirts hanging in your closet that are twice as loud as that sweatshirt, and you wear them to church all the time. Wear what you want, it'll be fine." Well, that did make a lot of sense, but I don't always listen to the wise guy. I still couldn't quite bring myself to wear it. I do, however, have a picture. I am Knuff. The voice of deep wisdom that resides within each of us is often deeply buried. And on top of it, there is another louder voice, fearful and critical. With practice, we can summon both these voices into conversation. And it is in such a conversation or dance between these two energies, our wise person and our little critic, that we can gain a positive perspective, achieve some balance, can draw upon our wisdom, and can be braver and more confident and show up in the world as our best self. In closing, I repeat the quote from Valerie Carr that Patty used earlier. The more we build that sovereign space inside of us, the more we're able to feel freedom no matter what is happening in the world. And that is what this wisdom practice is about, developing that place inside of us. Thank you.